the Rude Awakening Tour podcast.
Seats, Spark seats.
Hey, John, really a pleasure to sit down with you and talk. Been a while since we've been together. So just to start off a bit, so where are you from?
So, that's a great question. Pick a province.
Yeah.
My father was in the military, and so we had moved around my entire life. I personally was born in Germany and lived in Germany on and off for about 8 years. And then in 1980, at 10 years old, came to Canada and, started to learn about what Canada actually was.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. And so in the ensuing years, growing up here in Canada in schools from about, middle school on up or so, I've got to reacquaint myself with a lot of Canadian culture that I missed for those 9 years in Europe.
Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Eh?
Yes.
And so where are you now?
So I then joined the military, then moved all over the place myself, finally settling down here in Oakville, Ontario, Canada.
Nice.
Yes.
Very cool.
Lovely place here.
Yep. So, tell me a bit about yourself and, more about yourself and about your time in the military. And
Well, yeah, like I said, Mike, I joined the military myself. I'd spoken to my father after high school. I began on the boxing route, the boxing circuit. I was boxing and I was working in British Columbia. And I spoke to my dad about his time in the military and whether or not that may be a good fit for me. Should I entertain the idea of enrolling myself?
Yeah.
And he said, look, son, I'm biased. I believe every young man should do at least a 3-year term military service because he had a firm belief that it would set you up well in life. You would have a lot of skill sets from military service to make you organized and driven and focused about what you want to do in a life, say post-service. It sets you up well for life. And I said, all right, Dad. And he said, hey, you can do a quick 3-year first engagement. Get out if it doesn't work for you. So I took him up on that and I joined the military. And because of my physicality, because of my fitness levels from a couple of years of boxing on the boxing circuit, it was noticed when I arrived at battalion right away that I was a hard charger. Although with zero military experience, they still felt maybe the battalion isn't the best place for this guy. Let's put him on his jump course, see if he's fine with that. And he's off to the airborne right away.
Yeah.
So I invariably found myself totally wet behind the ears, no time in service. I think I had 8 months in the military as a whole, including basic training.
Yeah.
And wound up in the senior platoon in the Canadian Airborne Regiment.
Yeah.
8th platoon.
Yes. And it was,
and they're like, who the hell is this guy? What are you doing here? So I had a tough go at first.
Yeah.
But, eventually
But
after a while,
long.
when they saw that I was a hard charger, when I could at least be physical, they could teach me soldiering.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot from that platoon.
But just to go back for a second, you weren't just a boxer. Didn't you have a title?
Yeah, yes. I won gold at the British Columbia Winter Games for boxing and had emerald gloves, diamond belts, sin tournament, boxing gloves. So, yeah, we were doing very well. However, I was at the point where I had to make a decision. Do I become pro and look for sponsorships at this point? Or do I want to do something else? And for me, who'd been traveling his whole life, I saw myself now in one place and said, is this really for me? So that's why I called my father and he said, try the military for a couple of years. And so I did.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you excelled at that.
Well, I did, but only because I was trained. I was so new to the military, but I was trained so well by the senior soldiers in the airborne who, they were tough on me, but that's because airborning is tough.
Yeah.
And they didn't need someone that they were going to have to keep, dragging along on operations and missions and whatnot. So they had to whip me in shape awful quick. And so I spent my time in 8th platoon, about 9 months, whatever. And then the airborne did a reorganization and I wound up in a different platoon because we were then to begin Somalia.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, and you actually arrived there with Mike Starker, and the two of you showed up in 8th platoon, and I was in the senior platoon,
Yes, you were.
saying, what the hell? Who are these two new guys doing in 8th platoon? This is a senior platoon, although I'd only been there a year, right? But I
Yes.
mean, no, and then it didn't take, you guys weren't there very long, and then you were one of us,
Yeah.
right?
We had
because
to
you
prove
were,
ourselves.
but you were already, because your level was at that level. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
And Starker was a very keen soldier. He'd had reserve time, so he had much more of a head start than I did, just about how the military worked as a whole.
Yeah.
And how to relate with other people in the military. He'd already done that, and so he was a comic genius. So the guy could make anybody laugh. So those two things were quite helpful in enabling Starker to be accepted. And then, my approach to physicality and other stuff, a slight different approach, but I was not mouthy either. I shut my mouth and I learned because I knew that's what I had to do. So me and Starker, the two FNGs. Why did we wind up in 8th platoon? Because we were late in the posting season.
Yeah.
There was no more slots in the junior platoons. They had to dump us into 8th platoon.
Yeah.
That was why.
Yeah. Very cool, eh?
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Well, now I look back on it, although time in 8th platoon was extremely difficult and I was walking on eggshells every day, I knew at the end of it, I was going to turn out to be a very keen soldier because I was learning off of senior members of the Airborne.
Yeah.
And so once I got to 5 platoon, the junior platoon, almost a year later, I was actually elevated in their eyes and many of their eyes because those were junior guys and I had come from 8 platoon.
Yeah.
So it worked out very well for me in the end.
Yeah.
And although tough, I'll never forget the guys from 8 platoon who were just trying to get myself sorted out to be able to keep up with those boys.
Yeah. Yeah. You went over there, and then most of 8 platoon, or part of 8 platoon, went to direct fire support platoon.
That's right.
Where
I went.
Where you ended up after.
Because took my machine gun course and became a C6 gunner. So there I'm going to go into the machine gun platoon after Somalia.
Yeah.
And what was cool about that was learning from the best.
Yeah.
Right. So it was tough, but you're learning from the best. And we did go to direct fire support after, and I had a great time with the boys there too.
Yeah.
Afterwards.
Yeah. Cool. And then, so when you went to Somalia, you were in 5 platoon, was it?
5 platoon. So yes, after 8 platoon, I then go to, by the way, when I was in 8 platoon, correct me if I'm wrong, everyone in 8 platoon, besides you and me, were 6A qualified, even the corporals. I believe so.
Yeah, maybe.
I think they all were. At least 90%, even the corporals had already done their 6A, their infantry section commander course, and were just waiting for promotion.
Yeah.
And that's why they were in the senior platoon. They're waiting to get promoted out of it, right? So it was like the knowledge base in that platoon was insane.
Yeah, a lot of rock stars.
Yes, a lot of rock stars.
Yeah.
And so, then I ended up in 5 platoon for the mission to Somalia, Warrant Keogh's platoon, and there was a lot of interesting characters in that platoon as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. And then, say, because now you're at the time frame of leaving to Somalia and stuff. Do you remember the first time you took Mefloquine? Do you remember taking it prior to going on tour?
Well, that's where Mefloquine comes into our conversation. Yes, I very well remember taking Mefloquine. I was the advance party.
Okay,
I was over in Somalia mid-December. So for that reason, we were one of the first to be low dosed with the Mefloquine, which we know today isn't that dosing regimen isn't even used anymore with Mefloquine because you can't give someone one pill and then allow them enough time to test for suitability or tolerability before you give them the next one. And so if we're getting 1 or 3 at once and then 1 the next day, as they did, as we know today, that was a very problematic dosing regimen and shouldn't have occurred to us. The thinking then was to get enough Mefloquine in your system to be built up so that when you arrived, you would have some protection. But now we even know today how faulty that reasoning was. It hadn't even it was not going to be able to offer the protection that we needed right away. It was going to take more time for it to implement itself and to start actioning in the body. Anyway, that's for later on in the convo.
Yeah.
But yeah, low dosed. I remember taking it. I remember the nightmares and stuff that I had, but I couldn't attribute it to the drug. Like everybody else, we were quite pent up in the workup training, the on again, off again nature of even going on the mission.
Yeah.
It had changed. The parameters of the mission had changed. So with all of that stuff going on and me being a young man and what we were going to go into with Somalia,
Yeah.
then the stressors of that, of pre-prep prior to deployment, I had no idea that it was the drug. I just thought, okay, dude, you're ramped up because you're going on a mission.
Yeah.
Understandable.
Yeah.
So yeah, then that's when I began the Mefloquine. And then, a couple of days later, boom, I'm over mid-December, digging a shell scrape in Ballydogle, because when we arrived, there was no tents. We lived out of shell scrapes. We were the advance party.
Yep.
Right. So sucked.
Yeah. No doubt. And that's where you guys did like an air assault going in and.
Yes, we took over control of the airfield. Was it Ballydogle or Ballydogle? It was Ballydogle. We took over that airfield, and I did night patrols. I would take out patrols as well. Me and my my second man on the machine gun, Dan Dowe, a couple other troops.
Yeah.
Would do patrols around the airfield and link up with the American soldiers who were there midway through the patrols, and then we would all, patrol together, and then they would, peel off near the end of patrol. We would go back to our RV. They'd go back to their area, and it was exciting, and it was my first introduction to camel spiders.
Okay,
because they were flittering around. They were so attracted to the airport lights, and so they would cloister around and cover over the lights along the runways.
Oh no way!
Yeah, and so this was like my first night on a night patrol, and we could see the lights blinking, so we were concerned. So we go to the runway proper and check the lights out. But the lights are flickering on and off because they're being covered over by the camel spiders who are all over them.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So I take out my machete. All right. Cut one in half. These things are huge.
Yeah.
Okay. It turns around on itself and begins to attack itself now. It's been cut in half, and now it turns around and starts attacking itself. I'm like, oh my God, what fresh horror is this? And so I lean the machete down and go to touch the face of the camel spider, and I can hear and feel in the vibration of the machete the clank of the fangs closing onto the machete blade.
Oh no!
And I'm like, what in God? So, and that was my introduction. And of course, for the next 7.5 months, it's us battling Mefloquine and camel spiders and heat and sand and the rest of it, as you know. But I don't like spiders, bro. I'm not phobic.
Yeah.
But I have an extreme distaste for them.
Yeah.
So that really sucked.
Especially for their size.
Their size and speed.
Yep.
And their unpredictability. You never knew where one or three of them were going to show up and what corner they were hanging out in. And of course, it was never fun when we finally got the tenting to sleep in, for them to go up and then fall from the ceiling onto our cots when we were trying to sleep.
Yeah.
And that brings me to, did you bother with the bug net over your cot?
I did at the start, and then I got irritated by it and I got rid of it.
Oh, because I have the distaste for those suckers. I kept mine up. But sometimes they would get inside the netting. And there you were in a cage match with a camel spider trying to get the hell out of your cot with the freaking, with the bug netting. It was horrible.
Yeah. I didn't. One time one crawled across my chest, and I was like, what?
Jesus.
Right? But it's,
what are you gonna do?
And then it was like my blanket's up to here or whatever, right? Trying to cover up from them. But
so I'm happy that I'll never see those suckers again.
Yeah. Did you you notice many other people having any side effects from the Mefloquine?
So that's the thing. Like what I was talking about with nightmares and anxiety that I was experiencing from the drug, while on the drug, and how I was so freaking antsy all the time. So my role in Somalia, just because we hadn't covered it, was patrolling. patrolling, but foot patrols,
Yep.
foot patrols, foot patrols, foot patrols. And day and night. And they began, 12-hour patrols. There would be overnight patrols all night, what have you, because we established our presence in the area.
Yeah.
So my role was to be foot patrols in the city, right? So we would
Yep.
drive into the city, into Belladwayne,
Yep.
and patrol the city all night long or daytimes. And so I would see in other guys, they would be ramped up. I would be ramped up and anxious, yet there was no threat.
Yeah.
So the nightmares that guys would complain about, sometimes the nightmares were actually okay. Some guys liked the dreams they were having.
Yes, I've learned that some
yes,
people had
some liked them.
enjoyable nightmares.
Right.
Yeah.
But others mostly did not. And so, as we began to speak to each other and reveal our discomfort to each other, hey, how are you feeling about how are you on the drug? Hey, we began to learn that, the majority of the troops that were taking the Mefloquine had some sort of reaction to it.
Yeah.
Right. And so we knew, do we really need to take this sucker? And I think some people weren't taking it anymore because they just hated how they felt on it and just on their own quietly discontinued. Yeah. But for the majority of us good soldiers who follow orders, we kept up with the Mefloquine because we didn't want to get charged for contracting malaria.
You don't want to lose the tour.
You don't want to lose the tour. That goes on your record for life.
Yeah.
You got to get bounced from a tour. I mean, think about it, as you know. So we continued, most of us, to take the drug.
Yeah.
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 So I do remember others complaining.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I kind of remembered. Everybody having nightmares, having that sort of thing.
The agitations.
Right. Yeah.
The anger.
But,
short
I didn't think I had problems because I didn't have nightmares, so I didn't remember them, right? So,
yeah, gotcha.
But, yeah, there was, if you really looked into it, I wonder how many people actually had adverse reactions to Mefloquine on our tour.
Well,
right.
Why that isn't being more explored today, why there's no follow-up studies on the Airborne Regiment to determine their health outcomes from this, where they're not aware. Where's the longitudinal study? It hasn't been performed, although it has been requested by Canadian Armed Forces psychiatrists. I'll give you one example, Mr. Greg Passy.
Okay,
Dr.
nice.
Passy,
out in BC,
who had offered to provide testimony for the Somalia inquiry, but was labeled a black sheep instead, had even seen the Mefloquine effects on his own team while he was in Rwanda. And so later on, when the Somalia inquiry, he knew, based off his lived experience on the drug and what he had witnessed around him, that his own psychiatric team had been experiencing intolerability to the drug, to the point where there were mood disorders and agitation and even aggression. At one point, a member of his team pulled out a knife and just started, playing around with it for no reason other than to intimidate, and nobody knew why on his team. And so Dr. Passy was like, hey, I want to provide some testimony to this, and had asked his hierarchy, can we do a study on the Airborne Regiment from Somalia and Rwanda to determine how they reacted or tolerated the drug? And his immediate superior had said, yeah, okay, no problem. We'll look into that. And nothing was ever done.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. He's still around. I seen him last summer.
Yes, he was very concerned for Kyle Brown now I'm going back to 2014. Because I began this in late 2013.
Yeah.
But once we had reconnected with Dr. Passy, as this whole Mefloquine advocacy had been growing globally and then had been introduced to Canada, he was then again in the picture wanting to help out. And he's like, for Kyle, I help at operational support operational service injuries, OSI clinics.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get Kyle to one in British Columbia. So he figured Kyle was still living in BC.
Yeah.
And let's help out Kyle. Let's see how he's doing. I have experience with Mefloquine. I'm a psychiatrist. I know I should be able to tease out what may be an operational stressor or injuries that Kyle is experiencing, or what may be in fact his symptomatic exposure to the mefloquine, or other factors in determining, his mental and physical health.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't believe Kyle was ever able to link up with Dr. Passy to receive that care.
Yeah. No, I don't.
Yeah.
Don't think so. But he's in Edmonton, whatever.
Edmonton today,
Yep.
Kyle?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I hope he's okay. And that brings us to why we do this podcast, because we're continuing to try to spread awareness about mefloquine, its impact in military applications, and letting people know who aren't listening to news or who may be hermited away from society and social media and stuff for their own reasons, to give them the information that we know today about this emergent disease called quinism, which is a new term coined to explain chronic quinoline encephalopathy, which is the long-term disabling effects of mefloquine poisoning on people.
Yep.
So, as we do this podcast and continue to speak about this, and then, our audience may say, well, why? I mean, it's been 8 or 9 years, 10 years now. You guys have been at this. It's because the federal government refuses.
Yeah.
Now, ideally, this information doesn't come from us and our colleagues. Ideally, this information would come from Veterans Affairs itself and the Department of National Defense to notify members who are still in service, and for Veterans Affairs to notify those who were exposed to the drug, to check on their health, how are they doing, and do proper follow-ups on them, which is not occurring. And so with that not occurring, no screening program in play, then we have to continue to, along with the court cases that we have pending, do these podcasts, have people like you, people like me, and the other advocates like Dave Bona and Brandon Kett and all the others to do what they can to continue to spread awareness in the community. That's why we're here. Until this is finally recognized in Canada, although other jurisdictions are already recognizing the problem and what needs to be done. Canada is the last to finally face this fiasco. Grab the issue by the nettle and be able to help those who provided national sacrifice to country, to not leave them behind any longer, and to look into their health and to take care of them, because other countries already have.
And just to say, right, that the treatment for quinism is not the same as PTSD or traumatic brain injury.
That's 100% correct, Mike. Unfortunately, for those who were symptomatically exposed to the drug and are, dealing with this disease, quinism, we call it an injury or disease. Dr. Remington Evan wishes for people to, push the idea of this being more a toxidrome, a disease per se, because of the way the way its action is in the brainstem, the way that it, the kinetic effects of it. So you cannot take someone who's under traditional therapies for, say, PTSD or traumatic brain injury and expect the same outcomes, because we're dealing with something entirely different, right? We're dealing with a disease or what have you. It's like trying to put a splint, all right, on a broken arm or limb. You need a cast. Splint's not going to do the job. Some of these people, as we know, quinism is a spectrum. Some people have a little, some people have a lot of quinism. And so we know that if you're going to use, let's say for PTSD, as part of the traditional therapies, you have a pharmacological approach. You take pills. You're being prescribed pills, right? So we know that if your brain has been compromised through the injury, through your exposure to the drug and intolerability, then this polypharma approach to providing care for you may be doing more harm. It may exacerbate things. You are not going to respond in the same manner as someone who has never taken mefloquine and has been suffering from the effects through your own physical intolerability. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So too for TBI.
Yeah.
We must understand that quinism on its own is the third modern signature injury of warfare and must be treated as such, separate from TBI, separate from PTSD. What we need to do is more research into understanding how best to provide care and a treatment plan tailored for those that are involved in mefloquine poisoning.
Yeah.
Because if we do it wrong, we lead to poorer health outcomes, which leads to the person, all right, living in confusion and despair. He's not meeting his metrics mentally, say through his clinicians in getting better because he's on traditional therapy, right? Let's say he's taking equine therapy, art therapy, music therapy, okay? Talk therapy. You don't talk your way out of a brain injury.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work. Therefore, you have to understand a different approach must be taken.
Yeah.
And as we have canvassed many veterans over the years, we've seen that if they would remove themselves from the more negative aspects of their daily living, that means removing themselves from a poor diet, poor sleep hygiene, hanging out with negative people, taking drugs that aren't working
Drinking
for
alcohol.
you, numbing through alcohol or other drugs, all of these other things that are in that person's life, hermiting themselves, no access to nature, and on and on and on. So what we've seen is for those that have recognized they have quinism, so there's a recognition of it, an acceptance of it. Now they know what's wrong with them and they know why they have not been responding well to treatment, because quinism is going to make you treatment resistant because traditional therapies don't work, as I've explained. So then they can finally get a grip on what's wrong with them, and they will embrace the aspect of a cleaner living to try to reduce the impact that the drug has created on them. I'll give you an example from me. I have a diagnosis for chronic anxiety. I'll have it for life. It will never go away, and no talk therapy is going to fix it.
Yeah.
I have a diagnosis for depression. No traditional therapy has been successful in taking care of that either. Why? Why am I so treatment resistant? I've had 11 straight years of boutique, incredible therapy by the best in Canada.
Yeah.
And yet I still have anxiety. I still have depression, and I will for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Why? It's not through post-traumatic stress disorder, which I had been diagnosed with from the Somalia affair incident.
Yeah.
I was a witness for a moment or two. I wasn't involved, but I just was a witness for a moment or two passing by.
Yeah.
But that's where I got PTSD. Now, as we know, post-traumatic stress disorder is a treatable condition. It's treatable.
Yeah.
And not 100% disabling, which is why many veterans don't receive a disability from PTSD, because it's treatable and manageable.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah.
For most, not all.
Yeah.
Now, I've had 11 straight years of therapy, as I've mentioned, and yet there's been a new change. It's because I'm not still suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. That's been handled many years ago. I can talk and do talk freely about what had happened the evening in the bunker because I've gone through it all. It's okay now. None of that bothers me.
Yeah.
So what we're left with is, why do I still have comorbid diagnoses? It's because I have quinism.
Yep.
And understanding that does not lead me to despair. It leads me to an acknowledgement of knowing what is wrong with me and how I need to live life. So you're not going to find a guy that lives a better quality of life than me. I take it so seriously because my physical health is so directly linked to my mental health.
Yeah.
More than others. So I know that I need to have all the spokes on the wheel of wellness.
Yep.
If I start removing some of those spokes, say I'm going to drink too much this week, or I don't have access to nature that week, or whatever. If I start to remove spokes, then I notice I start to spiral. Spiraling for me is just being in my head. Now I
Yeah.
know I'm in my head too much.
Yeah.
Well, then that's a spiral. And then I immediately ensure that whatever spoke I had removed, I replace again and follow it to the letter.
Yeah.
And I have a good standard of living. I have a good quality of life because I'm able to function, because I understand what's wrong with me and I understand what I'm
Yeah.
facing.
And
And-
you know what to avoid or what not to do.
So to
help.
minimize the impact of quinism
Yeah.
in my life.
Yeah.
It's about a modulation. It's about a minimization of the things that could throw you for a spin and take you off your game.
Yeah. So, if you know what to avoid because you know what you're affected by, that you're affected by quinism, then, and that the treatment for quinism and PTSD or traumatic brain injury is different,
Yes,
there lies your importance for the screening process.
that's exactly right.
Right.
We need to screen veterans that were that had been given Mefloquine on their tours.
Yep.
Screen them to see how is their health, and
Yep.
then we can tease out for some of them, right, and ask them the certain questions that Dr. Nevin had created through his WRMI instrument. This is a screening instrument, a 2-part questionnaire.
Yep.
To give to clinicians or to give to caseworkers for VA to
Yep.
ask the question of that client, the veteran client. Did you ever take Mefloquine?
Yep.
Second question, when you took Mefloquine, how did you feel while you were on the drug?
Yep.
And based off the answers, then you can start to explore more that person's health and determine whether or not they may be on the wrong treatment plan, or this is why you're not responding well, or, teasing out, figuring out through some other markers like neurological, vestibular, whatnot,
Yep.
that this may be Mefloquine,
Yep.
not PTSD, or it could be both.
Yep.
We have to remember that for some people, they're commingled.
Yep.
Right? There's a commingling where they still have PTSD and didn't respond well to talk therapy because they didn't get along with their clinician or
Yep.
wouldn't continue to go to counseling.
Yep.
Or they have a touch of quinism,
Yep.
which affects them as well. So, and then there are those that are quinism only, nothing more than Mefloquine, but got a PTSD diagnosis and is receiving therapies for that. And of course it isn't going to work.
Yep.
So there's those that have PTSD. There's those with PTSD and TBI. There's those with PTSD, TBI, and quinism. There's those with quinism. There's those with just TBI. That's why it is so important to screen our modern veteran community to be able to tease out, to disentangle what may be the impacts of the drug because they're not responding well. So, I may sound like I'm repeating, but I mean, this is what needs to be emphasized most because it's lacking in our Canadian cohort today.
Yep.
It's happening elsewhere. It's not happening in Canada.
Yep. And very important.
Oh, it's
Like
critical because we're trying to get better health outcomes. We're trying to reduce veteran suicide rates. So we also must understand that a cardinal outcome of someone who has been suffering from quinism for several years and is unaware of what's truly wrong with them or how they are, they end up in confusion. It's a cycle of confusion and despair. They end up breaking up with the family breaks down, and that member then begins to hermit himself, feel sorry for himself, self-medicate, and that leads to suicidal ideation, which leads to him or her completing suicide, right? Yeah. And our suicide rates were so high as it was. Yeah. This is one of the factors as
and
to
that
why.
I don't think they track whatsoever.
No, they don't.
Right?
No, not at all. It's been horrible. So there's quite a few areas where we had to advocate and fight for change in order for the Veterans Affairs entities, extra service organizations, and others, non-for-profits, groups that help veterans, to make them aware of what quinism is, how to try to tease it out, and the importance of why we need to do so. It was great to compare and contrast to show these organizations where other countries are, and where Canada needs to be.
Yeah. And the sooner we get on board, and the sooner we start doing a screening process and stuff like that,
Then
the
we'll
sooner,
improve lives.
sooner people are going to, you know, then they'll be on the right regime to treat themselves, or at least,
Yes.
start to mitigate those things that,
So they can have a more
make our
functional life.
Mefloquine worse.
So they can have a happier life.
Yeah.
A life that makes sense to them.
Yeah.
Okay. Another part of this that I'd like to get into is in Veterans Affairs and the Department of National Defense acknowledging this, so too would an apology come. Because, again, in Canada, the reason why this has taken so long for Canada to get on board in lockstep with our other, Five Eyes partners and NATO partners in dealing with this issue is there's pending litigation, and the government must cede some culpability.
Yeah.
And with that comes an apology with the acknowledgement, and then, of course, the compensation for those who were harmed.
Yeah.
Opening up the Somalia affair is a Pandora's box for the Canadian military and the Canadian government as a whole, because successive governments, both conservative and liberal, ever since have looked the other way past the charter rights of those who were symptomatically exposed to the drug and infringed upon those rights for many years now. So, of course, the Canadian government, who successfully spun the Somalia affair and scapegoated and wrapped that all up nice and neatly, they want no part in us reopening this to show who the actual bad actors were and to apologize for disgracing and disbanding this proud airborne unit that did not deserve national opprobrium and shame for what had gone down in Somalia. That's a lot for the government to fess up to.
For a drug that they were given and that it affected the regiment, right?
It destroyed the operational effectiveness of the airborne.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. It did nothing less than destroy the operational effectiveness of the airborne itself. That's what Mefloquine did.
Yeah. I used an example one time saying, when I first got to the airborne, right, Rui Amaral was my platoon warrant. We're on a live fire exercise, right?
Yes.
We finished firing. We've cleared our weapons, and we're waiting there for him to clear them. And then we're like, "Hey, Warrant, you're going to come clear our weapons?" And he's like,
"Your range safety staff."
He's like, "No." He's like, "Are your weapons clear?" Well, yes, Warrant. Well, then fucking clear them. So then we cleared them, and that was it. And I was like, "You see this in the airborne? You're treated like a man, right? You're treated like you know what you're doing because you do, right? And your level of professionalism and your level of training
and the
is so much higher.
Courtesy shown you, by your leadership,
and then
acknowledging you've gotten to a high unit.
So that's the level we're at. That's the level we were at. Then you take the drug, and
we saw wacky stuff everywhere.
People, there was I come into my tent and Buddy's face down on the on the floor, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna screw you. Look after yourself. In the morning, I'll check on him, right? I'll ask him, right? I'm just like, oh, he's drunk, right?
Yeah.
So then I asked him, I said, geez, you must have had a good night last night, eh? You're laying on the floor, and he's like, no, man, I never drank. That was a Mefloquine night, and he woke up in our tent on the floor, and me, full of compassion, said, look after yourself, right? I'm not gonna. I got no time for drunks, right? I was one myself.
We didn't know what was going to
say, right? But you know what I mean? And that's the quality that we were then, right?
Yeah.
My section commander, we went down a road that was we went through a minefield. And when we came back and I looked up on the map, I'm like, we went through a minefield. What the hell? Right?
Yeah, no, there has been quite a few stories over the years that we've been able to share with each other that just make no sense, were wackadoodle moves and would never occur in such a highly trained outfit normally. No, there was all kinds of wacky moves being made, And again, it took time later on for us, once we all figured out Mefloquine's role,
Yeah.
to understand how it did compromise the cognition and the abilities of these checked out soldiers.
Yeah,
And
it
leadership.
affected all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Guys were raking the sand, saying, "I've got to get all the rocks out. I've got to get all the rocks out." Right? Like that was a story told to me, and you know, they
I
were
was on
all
a
over.
patrol one day. I was on a patrol, 6 or 7 of us. I'm downtown Mefloquine. There's a bunch of children around us. We're on the main street, and there's a bunch of children come over, and they're all around us, happy, laughing, polite, happy to see us. I'm looking at my other members. They all seem totally fine. Everything's cool. I wig right out. All of a sudden, I had this overwhelming urge that we were being surrounded by soldiers and stuff,
Oh no,
and that they were encircling us. I had my hand, on my C7, my assault rifle, because at this point in the tour, we had to give up our machine guns because they said it's too much firepower in town because it's going to go rip right through these, the houses and stuff. So they're like, okay, so C6 gunners, which we were kind of happy because we didn't have to lug them around anymore.
Yeah.
We then kept our C6s and then foot patrolled only with rifles, right?
Yeah.
Or I'd be the shotgun guy. Quite a few times I was the shotgun guy on the bridges. Yeah. We do bridge patrols, whatever. But yeah, so I was happy to drop that C6 after a while because 12-hour freaking patrols with a C6 in Somalia wearing a flak jacket sucked.
Yeah.
Right?
In the desert.
In the desert, right?
Yeah.
So I was happy. Anywho, here I am with the C7, the assault rifle, and I'm so ramping up that I'm at the point where I'm cocking and I'm ready to unload around the whole circle and let them have it. Yeah. I don't know what stopped me. I think I just had, a second to just go, no, it's not real. No, it's okay. No, it's kids. No, it's just kids. It's just kids. And that was what made me stop from actually just to the crowd. I couldn't believe it. And then later I'm saying to myself, what the fuck? Why were you so ramped up, John? This was a patrol, like 100 other patrols you'd done. It's daytime. There's children. I had an episode. I had a psychotic, a floored in and out psychosis of incredible like anxiety or whatever. And it was like, and then we walked off and everything was fine. And like I said, I was left shaking, not shaking, shaken from the experience of, I almost unloaded into a crowd of children for absolutely no reason.
Yeah.
So that was but one of a few moments.
Put us on an on a more aggressive stance all the time, I think.
We were ramped up. Yes. And so, my God, it was like me constant monitoring myself going, Jesus, because I'm not that type. Yeah. I was very, I felt confident in my skill sets. I just spent, like I told you, a year with 8 Platoon, right? So I was quite confident, that I knew how to handle myself. I was strong. I was fit. I was with a great team. Everybody was checked out, great soldiers. I had no reason to be anxious or fearful of that environment. But that was a classic example of being hit with the poisoning, the involuntary intoxication of the drug.
Yeah. Why? So you obviously had prodromal symptoms.
Oh, I did.
Right? I mean,
Yeah. But I never discontinued because I thought, I'm a trooper, which is a private. But so on the lowest rank, I'm going to catch the most trouble.
Yeah.
And it's like, I did see some guys ended up, they'd have flies in their knees. Those flies that would bury their eggs into you.
Okay.
They like, I would see sort of things like this. So I saw how hostile the environment was. So it was another reason for me to say, I'm just going to keep taking the Mefloquine.
Yeah. So. But I mean, if as a drug trial, right, they should be monitoring, checking up, double checking and saying, So, John,
course.
did you have some more of those symptoms? You
Have
better
you had any of them?
discontinue.
Explains which
You
ones you
better
may have.
discontinue the use.
Right.
But there was nobody doing that. There was
No.
nobody monitoring. Nobody to say you've
There
had
was-
a prodromal reaction. You need to stop taking Mefloquine. None of that.
There was absolutely no intention by the Canadian Armed Forces to conduct the safety monitoring study or to adhere to the clinical protocols at all. It
Yep.
was a ruse to get the drug for free. And
Yep.
they then got industrial amounts of it and handed it out to the troops and along with the beer,
Yeah, right.
right?
Here's your 2 beer per man per day, which equates to 6 beer, 8 beer per man per day until they
Yes,
try to say,
exactly.
don't do it. And then you see
Everybody's doing it.
high leadership walking
They're doing
away
the same.
after the briefing.
Yes.
Yep. I guess it doesn't matter.
Doesn't
Right.
matter.
And, so they obviously had no intention at the beginning to even monitor the
No.
fact that it was a drug trial.
None. And therein
And,
lies the gross negligence.
So what was, so then what was the real reason behind us taking Mefloquine?
Okay, so let me get into 3 things I
Yeah.
want to
Yeah,
clarify.
Sure.
One of those things that I want to clarify is about the drug.
Yeah.
All right. Why do they want us to take it? The second was when the protests had start to become planned when we were orchestrating those. And the third one was about how Mefloquine affects pregnant women and the fetus, the developing fetus. Those are 3 things I'd like to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I noticed in one of the other episodes, there's some things there that need clarification. But let's get back to the first part, the drug part.
Yeah.
So you said there was never an intention
To follow any guidelines towards doing a
and because of that, because of the way, and this gets me to point number 1, because of the way in which the Canadian Armed Forces got a hold of the drug and the way they had used it and the way that they had been so negligent was but one of the reasons that Dr. Michelle Brill Edwards quit in protest at Health Canada. Now, it was earlier mentioned that Dr. Michelle Brill Edwards had quit in protest because of what went down in Somalia in 93. No, she hung on for another 3 years. She did not quit until 1996.
Okay.
Mefloquine was one of the abuses. Then there were others. And finally, she had had enough.
Yep.
Dr. Edwards, and quit Health Canada, became a black sheep, had to find work out of Ottawa. She had to go to Toronto and blah, blah, blah. And why she's so supportive today of our efforts. Because she was there. She was head of the drug sort of introduction into Canadian, like a drug testing, whatnot. She was part of the drug, the organization that dealt with drugs
That approved
at Health
them
Canada.
and brought them
Approvals,
into
trials, all that sort
yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm no expert, but
Yeah.
that was her space. And again, when she'd seen the continuous abuses, and Mefloquine was a big one, and there was a couple of more after that, she says, I quit.
Yeah.
Health Canada needs to get its act cleaned up.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. I know I'm bouncing here a little bit,
No,
but I
that's
kind of
good.
want these things out because
Yeah.
another thing that affects me from quinism, short-term memory. It is horrible in me. I have memory issues. Oh, now, the second part I wanted to get into was how does Mefloquine affect the developing fetus? So it was mentioned before that maybe Mefloquine could affect children's development. So if you took Mefloquine, Mike, and you had children, there may be birth defects or abnormalities as a result of you taking Mefloquine.
Which we know there was a number of those after our tour.
Sure. But I must reiterate or must state, yes, we know the science is there, and Dr. Remington Nevin, the expert that we should always refer to, knows that Mefloquine is a likely abortifacient. He knows that Mefloquine is not good for the developing fetus because maybe that fetus is intolerable 2
Yeah.
quinoline-based antimalarials.
Yeah.
Okay, but the fetus can't tell mom.
Yeah.
But that doesn't say that mefloquine affects people on an embryonic level at the embryo, where it's a teratogen, meaning it is something that is going to affect the development of a child
Yeah.
from the embryonic stage DNA level. Make sense?
Yep.
No. It has been shown mefloquine, as Dr. Nevin states, should not be referenced for pregnant women. Women who are pregnant should not take mefloquine because of the effects that may occur on the fetus. The fetus can't, notify mom.
Yeah.
So that's as far as we know with it. So it shouldn't
Mhm.
be given to pregnant women. Next thing, Dr. Nevin was recently in Canadian Parliament at Veterans Affairs Committee again, speaking about this a few months ago, because of its specific risks for women in the military, because of the rate of pregnancies. And if women are on mefloquine and there's a high rate of pregnancies, right?
Yeah.
Then maybe that military, whatever military, their policy should change and be more tailored to suit the individual instead of throwing mefloquine to everyone by rote checklist.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean by that? By just handing it over willy-nilly, but understanding that females of lighter weight and body type and who could get pregnant on tour, maybe we shouldn't be handing them over mefloquine. And we should change the policy
Yeah.
to reflect that to more suitable drugs such as Malarone or doxycycline.
Yeah.
So the third part I wanted to get into before I forget was, when did this all begin? We, meaning me and my colleagues,
Yeah.
both internationally with the International Mefloquine Veterans Alliance and here at home
Which
with
you
the
formed one.
Yeah, I'm the co-founder of the International Mefloquine Veterans Alliance.
And when did you found it?
We founded that late 2014, something like that, I believe.
Yeah.
I co-founded this alliance with retired Major Stuart McCarthy, who was a whistleblower. He was still in the Australian Defence Force when he began the movement.
Yeah.
We soon met up, began Zoom calls, strategizing. We quickly learned that the only way we're going to get this movement to Canada is to establish an international alliance, right?
Yeah.
And to be able then to take it to Canada to demonstrate how other jurisdictions have acted upon this and compare and contrast where Canada is and where they need to get to be to match, our efforts internationally.
Yeah.
So yes, we co-founded the International Mefloquine Veterans Alliance to give us more clout as a group to then approach Canada and say, hey, this is what we need to deal with. But we knew at the same time that we had to create a civilian entity because civilian travelers were also taking this drug. It was originally for the civilian traveler, not for military applications per se. You know what I'm saying? Later on. Now, we created, through Bev Skiernuck, an optometrist in British Columbia, Mefloquine Awareness Canada.
Yeah.
This would be the site for civilians because their experience with the drug would be different from the military experience, where civilians could discontinue. They could just simply quit the drug if they didn't like it and move on.
Yeah.
Whereas we were mandated, forced to continue to take it.
Yeah.
So slightly different experiences, but many similar outcomes for those symptomatically exposed, didn't know to discontinue, and now are dealing with quinism. So in 2014, as we set up these entities, we then began to push for Veterans Affairs to take this on. So those efforts began 2014, well before some of the newer advocates came into play.
Yep.
Unfortunately, for the members of the Canadian Airborne Regiment and other soldiers from subsequent tours of Somalia, Rwanda, and I'm speaking about the largest group, I'm speaking about Afghanistan, they're the largest group that were exposed to this drug. They had no understanding of what mefloquine's impacts were. They had no understanding of the controversial emergent scientific literature explaining about what mefloquine was and how it impacted the Canadian forces,
Yeah.
there was a lot of cognitive bias. There was a lot of backfire effect from those who tried initially to dismiss our claims,
Yep.
right? About getting Canadian soldiers to understand what happened to them and how this drug affects their lives today, possibly for a number of them.
Yep.
So it took a couple of years to be able to fight against that backfire effect and get these soldiers to understand. It was a lot for them to understand, to take in. And for some of them, this is 15, 20 years down the road,
Yep.
right? That we're talking about since they even took the drug. So, for those reasons, the fight was difficult here, but we won. And
Yep.
no one could refute the testimony of Dr. Jonathan Douglas, who was the head of the Ontario Psychological Association, who provided testimony, and Dr. Remington Nevin, the world expert
Yeah.
on quinine-based antimalarial drugs. Once we had them lined up, the academia,
Yeah.
and we had, another colleague of mine internationally, Professor Jane Quinn, a neuroscientist from Australia. She
Okay.
provided testimony as well. Dr. Edward Sellers, Professor Emeritus at University of Toronto, dealing with pharmacy.
Yep.
Then we won all the troops over,
Yeah.
but we could not yet get VA or the Canadian Armed Forces to act again because they have to cede, they have to admit culpability for the way in which they used this drug over the years, compromising the health and welfare of their troops.
Yep.
Sorry, this can be very wordy, but there's a lot to unpack.
Yep. And the International Mefloquine Alliance that you formed, what did that also lead to?
Well,
Right? Which
great
is kind
question. What
of
it
very
led,
important.
what it led to, it became a beacon for people. It became a source, a place for information. We had our websites, the Facebook groups. It became a place for community to gather. It became a place for a tribe to coalesce. Because for those that were affected by the drug, they had to know that they weren't alone anymore.
Yep.
That they were part of a group, a community that were disenfranchised, abused, then neglected, and tossed away. They were thrown over the fence, leaving society to pick up the pieces afterward. And so for them to then go, holy crap, this is what was wrong with me then. This is possibly what's wrong with me now.
Yep.
And now I can understand it. And look at all those around me, part of a group.
Yeah.
Well, once you give people that, you give them strength and you give them purpose and you give them meaning for their own lives, but also for them to then to want to help others. Some became advocates and still are.
Yeah.
Most didn't. That's because we only need so many advocates. But that is what happened as a result of the International Mefloquine Veterans Alliance being formed. It was a professional body that could be respected. It was filled with journalists, lawyers, academia, and other.
Yep.
That was the beacon, like I said initially, for them to come to. We were the lighthouse.
Yep.
So that's what was the result of the IMVA.
And it led to a black box warning, right?
Yes. So then,
Just
along
wanna
with the
explain
work
that.
of Dr. Nevin in the US, he was able to finally get that black box warning, the strictest, strongest labeling possible for a drug.
Yep.
And the updated product monographed inserts to acknowledge the permanence of effects,
Yep.
where these things could be forever.
Yep.
That was important. And then, although this occurred in 2016 in the United States,
Yep.
we didn't get the update in Canada until 2017. But we got the update to include these symptoms you experience from the drug may be permanent.
Yep.
That's important because it's acknowledging quinism. It's acknowledging that something has impacted someone for the rest of their life.
Yep.
With that acknowledgement, then came the ammunition we needed to demand that Veterans Affairs acknowledge this and to provide not only compensation for those that were wrongfully harmed from the drug, but more effective, proper treatment plans being developed to be able to meet the needs of those afflicted.
Yeah.
Now, my colleagues in Australia, way ahead of the game, have already provided a neurocognitive program
Okay.
to the Department of Veterans Affairs in Australia, and had worked in conjunction with the Department of Veterans Affairs in Australia to implement this. Sadly, politics took over, as it often does. When you mix science and politics, you get politics.
Yeah.
And it reared its ugly head, and slowly, the neurocognitive program that wasn't properly nurtured uh, dissolved. And the people who had fought so hard and had got an audience in Australian Senate about this,
Yep.
right, then had to re-begin the fight to say, hey, we've already even provided you with a neurocognitive program. You just need to implement that and a screening program, enroll your veteran clients, and let's get this sorted out.
Yep.
However, the great thing about Australia, and again, here's an angle that most of you are unaware of, but how they are ahead of us, but how we can take their actions as a template for us to employ here in Canada.
Yep.
They have a Defense and Veteran Suicide Royal Commission underway.
Yeah.
They've just completed their findings, and they will send out their report in September, I believe.
Oh, no way.
Yes. And in September will be their final report about, the why are there so many suicides? Why is there so many homeless? Why are there so many veterans whose needs aren't being met?
Yeah.
We need that here in Canada. And a part of that commission was to look at the impact of Mefloquine on their troops.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. But
Nice.
they were introduced not just to Mefloquine, but they were also introduced to another quinoline-based antimalarial called tafenoquine, right?
Yep.
The hopes were that tafenoquine would be less toxic than Mefloquine, but it wasn't. So a trial was run in Australia for tafenoquine as well. So they're not just Mefloquine veterans. In Australia, they're Mefloquine and tafenoquine veterans. However, again, they're ahead of us in the advocacy, which is good because it means the successes, the wins that they have over there, we can take to Canada.
Yeah.
And the wins we have in Canada, we can take to them. So because we're part of the international alliance,
Yep.
we get to compare and contrast our efforts and victories and focus on where we need to focus to get this thing sorted out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And so too, we will see, and I fight for, I have this Mefloquine advocacy, but I'm also very focused on ensuring we get our own Veterans Affairs Royal Commission in Canada so that we can, improve services in so many areas, not just Mefloquine. In so many other areas, we need to have improvements. So you got big times. There's all other kinds of issues going on with VA. It's horrible. And they need sunlight.
Yeah.
They need a Royal Commission. It's the only way we're going to improve matters.
Yep. For the suicides, like
that alone should prompt Canada to act.
If you even look, at at those that were lost in Afghanistan, some took their life, right?
More veterans, as we know, have died by completing suicide than from any action in Afghanistan.
But I mean, even those that were in Afghanistan and that had taken their lives are among the fallen, and they represent even a number there.
Yes.
Right. So it's not just about them coming home. Some never made it home from
some
tours.
Didn't even make it.
Right.
Yes. Yes.
And Scott Smith is one.
Scott Smith is an example.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned Scott because I'm sitting in the home right now of Scott Smith's childhood friend.
Yeah.
Just over to my right are some former belongings of Scott's. So Scott Smith's experience in Rwanda is very personal to me. I know the family. And I also know that instructions were provided by the Department of National Defense to ignore the instructions on the Mefloquine label to discontinue use if someone was experiencing symptoms. Ignore it and continue taking the drug.
Yeah.
They actually told the troops to disregard the symptoms prodromally that were warning them to discontinue. And what happened with Scott? He could
Was
not
not a
discontinue,
discontinue. Yep.
even though he was experiencing the symptoms. I talked to people who talked to him the day before, 2 days before. They they were very explicit in telling me that Scott was very vocal about how he felt about the drug and the way it was affecting him. And the
Yep.
poor guy was ordered not to stop, and he completed suicide.
Yep. He was hallucinating, right?
Yes.
And they say that the minute you're having prodromal symptoms, you should stop immediately, or it's doing worse damage.
Yes.
Right.
It's cumulative.
And he was hallucinating in Somalia, and he hallucinated in Rwanda.
Yes.
Stolen the drug. and
Can I
still taking
mention
it.
also there was a previous broadcast that mentioned that Scott was complaining to certain people about it. He complained vociferously to Bonnie Taves.
Okay.
Bonnie Taves was a reporter for a transport periodical, a magazine.
Okay.
She interviewed Scott on the plane on the way over. It was then that Scott had said, I don't want to continue to take the drug. This drug was very difficult for me in Somalia. But yet I'm here, I'm on the plane, I'm going to Rwanda, and I know I'm going to have to continue to take Mefloquine. But I
Yeah.
really don't want to, and it was horrible for me the first time.
Yeah.
He said that on the plane over to Rwanda to Bonnie Taves, the reporter, the journalist who also did the articling for Transport magazine. So someone had said that Scott had complained to his mom. No, it was to the reporter Bonnie Taves.
No, but it
And
had
it's
said it
recorded.
to his mom too.
Okay, well, I haven't
Yeah,
talked to
I'm just
Val
saying,
about
yeah.
that yet, but I'm sure he probably has through correspondence or a phone call. I
Yeah.
can't see how he didn't. So
Yeah, no, because when I started the whole tour, she had given me a one of the things they had read out. Her sister read it out.
Nancy,
Yeah, so gave me that to read and to say whatever it took to try to make things happen. Right,
Gotcha.
but and then it's sad to know then, even to say, so we know hallucinations were a part of it and everything. There were people going to Afghanistan that were having nightmares, right? This is 15 years after the drug was taken by Scott and by
Yes.
us in
Yeah.
Somalia, and
Val
yet
and Bonnie Taves made
still moved on.
and rest in peace, Bonnie. We love you. Rest in peace. But Bonnie had and Bonnie had a very good statement when she said, valuable, very valuable information about the harms of the drug just died on the vine because no actions were taken to screen those from Somalia or Rwanda about, how the drug was and how it impacted them to be given back to Health Canada. Because none of that information was sent forward by the CF to Health Canada. Therefore, Health Canada was more than happy to tell doctors, prescribe this drug, the drug is fine, not only in the future for military purposes, but for the civilian travelers, those hapless travelers who were all told by the doctors, the drug's fine. Drug's fine.
Yeah. So, like, say, Motion 502 in Alberta was passed in March of 2022, headed by an MLA that took Mefloquine and they stopped taking it because they were having side effects.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
So there's an example there. I mean, and that's somebody fighting, and that's once again 15, 20 years after all this started.
Yeah.
Right.
It's unbelievable. The more you unravel this whole fiasco with Mefloquine, the Canadian experience, the military experience, it's really like bad plumbing. When you go into it, it just gets worse at every turn.
Yeah.
The way that they were neglectful, right,
Yeah.
and disregarded our health was obscene. And it carried on all the way through to the Afghanistan tour.
Yeah. Like
unbelievable neglect.
I had a guy just
Criminal.
2 months ago say to me, man, the thing I hated the worst about Mefloquine was the hallucinations.
Mhm.
I was taken in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
Probably took it in 05, 06 or somewhere in there, right?
It's funny you keep mentioning hallucinations, because it was the hallucinations that Clayton Matchey was experiencing when I was passing through the bunker that I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, right? That had caused the event that gave me PTSD.
Yeah.
So quickly, just to review, I got called over to the bunker. I wasn't on duty.
Who called you to the bunker?
Clayton.
Okay.
I was just a passerby. He called over and said, "Hey, Dowe, come on over here. Look, we got a prisoner." Okay. I never hung out with him. I wasn't even in his section or his platoon. I was in 5 platoon, but we were co-located. So, and I think he was just proud or happy that we finally got one of the guys that was continuously breaking into the camp. Shadane was a repeat offender.
Yeah.
So I lean into the bunker. I walk down the step. I look in the bunker. I see Shadane there. And Shadane is, he's tied up, got a bit of bloody, like a swelling and stuff like that. But he didn't look overly hurt or in distress. He was just there sitting on the floor, right?
Yeah.
So I look down, I see him, whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, you got a prisoner. And I look back at Clayton, who's not saying anything. Now Clayton's quiet. And I look over, I see Kyle Brown also in the bunker. And Kyle Brown's just looking at me straight-eyed and saying nothing. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Clayton starts screaming, "Fucking spiders," and starts smacking the thighs of Shadane. Smacked him on the thigh twice, once on the lower leg, and then kept going, swinging the baton and beating where he thought there were camel spiders in the bunker, even along the sandbag walls. So I'm like, what the fuck? There's no spiders in here. I'm like, what the fuck is he doing? So then I look back at Kyle, and Kyle's just like, Kyle knows something is wrong.
Yeah.
Kyle knew something was wrong. And so I just went, well, there's Clayton turned around and beating the side of the freaking bunker. Why am I even here? I'm out of here. And I just took my leave and I walked and start walking away. I walk off. I get about 20 or 30 feet. Hey, Dowe. Kyle comes running up to me. Hey, man, I don't know what's going on. I'm not in my nature. I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's really going on here. He's making an admission to me of that which I don't even know what's all going on. I have such a small snapshot.
Yeah.
A minute, 2 minutes less. But so I just said, well, I don't know what's going on, bro. I said, oh, and by the way, you're a trooper. He's a master corporal. So you better get back over there,
Yeah.
And and he's like, okay. And then he turns and he walks off. And I walk about another 10 feet, 15 feet or whatever. And I turn back and look. And his shoulders are all slumped and he's slowly walking back to the bunker. Now, this is at 11 o'clock at night. I'm one of the last guys to get on the phone because I'm the lowest rank, right? So it's near the end of the night. I got a 6 a.m. foot patrol in the morning. I'm going off to bed. So I go lay in bed. I put my music on because I always listen to music to try to sleep. And the album's about an hour. The hour passes. I don't fall asleep. So now I'm like, I wasn't a smoker per se, but I would smoke, but I wouldn't buy them. I bum them off of people all the time.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't buy cigarettes because I believe in being fit and I didn't want to buy smokes to smoke too much. Does this make sense? But it was a great stress relief sometimes to have a coffee and a smoke with the boys.
Yeah.
So I would. Anyway, I knew Brady McDonald was working the phones at the headquarters tent. And Brady was a soft touch. Like he would always say, yeah, okay, Dow, here's a smoke, fuck off. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, Brady's on. I'll go bum a smoke off Brady. So I go up, see Brady. Dude, can I get a smoke? And he's like, yeah, all right, man, here you go. Hands me a cigarette. And the tent is open. The flaps are open. And I look over, I can see commotion at the bunker. So I'm like, what's that all about? And Brady's like, I don't know, man. I have no idea. And that's all he said. And then he put his head back down to his book. He would write communications, right? Because he's on the radio. Anywho, so I walk over. The couple of guys are there and they're splashing water. They're trying to revive Shadane. They're saying, no, he's not coming to. He's not coming to. Right? There's about 4 guys there or something. So I walk up. I'm looking down like, Jesus Christ. And he's just there on the ground. But there's hardly any movement in him. And I'm like, holy fuck. What's this all about? And I'm like, well, not my problem. I'm not even on shift here. So I just turned around. I went back to my bunk and then actually fell asleep. We come to find out the next day, Shadane had been killed. He had been beaten to death.
Yeah.
And then became the investigation. They listened to the military police listened to my testimony, or interviewed me and said, "Okay, we're going to need you to testify for the prosecution." They told me later.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, and so I had to testify for the prosecution against Kyle Brown. I just stated what I saw, how quickly I was in and out of there, and they said, "Okay, you're free to go. See you later."
Yeah.
And that was the last I knew of the Somalia affair until a phone call with Kyle in 2013, because my wife had said, "John, you have unresolved issues from Somalia. You never did resolve them. Why don't you talk to the guy that you had the PTSD with that was in the bunker with you, Kyle?" I said, "Yeah, I think I'll seek him out." And we had the phone call. And one of the first things he said to me is, "John, investigate Mefloquine." I said, "What?" "Investigate Mefloquine." Yeah. And I said, "Okay, Kyle." That was in 2013. So then investigating it, I discover Hervé Blois. Hervé Blois, or Blois. Hervé was the physician assistant for Dr. Armstrong.
Right.
He was the guy that had accumulated a whole bunch of information for me, but he didn't have the strength anymore, the constitution for the fight. So he handed me the baton. He said, "John, you got more energy than me and Dave and a couple other guys."
Yeah.
He said, "And you really want to do this?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, well, you're the guy then." And he threw everything at me and said, "Run with it." That was in 2014. I said, "Okay, I will." And I took all the information from whistleblowers that Hervé had gleaned over the years and former testimony that hadn't made it.
Yep.
And with that, then sought out the other people that were in this Mefloquine space, veterans and civilians, and then began Mefloquine Awareness Canada and International Mefloquine Veterans Alliance. Sorry, that's a lot. That's a long diatribe about how this all began. But again, we're 11 years of history with this now.
Yep.
Really. Anyway, all that being said, we were eventually able to get to Veterans Affairs Committee. We eventually had the academics and others make the testimonials. And through that, the lawyers understood the merits of the case and were more than willing to fund the litigation.
Yeah.
And so when you see the confidence in major law firms funding litigation, then you know that the merits of the case are solid. And lo and behold, we end up with the Mefloquine mass tort, which is stemming from Dowe versus Attorney General of Canada, the class action, which we begin the whole litigation journey.
Yep.
And so now we're just waiting our turn. We're in the queue to finally have access to justice, get into the courts, and hold Canada accountable for the way in which they put so much of us in harm, our health and jeopardy, and refuse to act upon it.
Yep. I was going to say now.
That takes us to today.
Yeah.
In a roundabout way.
Now, was there anybody else that came into the bunker while you were there?
No, it was me, Kyle, Clayton, Kyle and Clayton. And then when I left the bunker, I did notice there were some guys walking over, but I didn't know who they were. I think they were from the TAC, you know how we had the co-located helicopter squadron?
Yeah.
I think they were members of those guys.
Oh,
and I think maybe they were coming over to the bunker, probably wanted to see that we finally caught one of the repeat infiltrators, but to our lines. But I didn't stay and chat or nothing. Like I said, I was out of there. I just wanted to leave because what the hell was that with Clayton? It made no sense. It was very disturbing.
It would be,
Oh, by the way, when and I don't think I've mentioned this, but when Clayton first smacked Shadane on the thighs, he yelled out, "Canada, Canada."
Shadane did?
Yeah. And then like I said, Clayton then began focused on the rest of the bunker because he was in a fluid psychosis. We know today he started hallucinating the camel spiders and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were beer in the bunker. There was alcohol in the bunker. I saw a Castle beer in there.
Yeah.
So, we got the lawsuits today. You're one of the members.
Yeah.
You're one of the lead plaintiffs.
Yeah.
So this is fantastic. I know the waiting game sucks, but what else are you going to do? You just have to accept that sometimes access to justice moves at a glacial pace. But here's another aspect. A lot of people that I knew that had come on board in this Mefloquine fight and were vocal in complaining, both to me, both in the media, and to Veterans Affairs about how Mefloquine had affected him and continues to. A great number of us were shuffled quietly and without application or no fanfare into the diminished earnings capacity cohort. The Veterans Affairs version of long-term disability or permanent and total disability.
Yep.
Now, when I had asked about why, I was told, well, you didn't complete this other program within the allotted time. 5 years had passed. So we don't think that you're going to be functional for work. Therefore, you get the DEC. You get the permanent disability. You know how hard it is for people to get compensation or claims awarded by VA? So VA is not in the habit of handing out expensive disability awards.
Yeah.
But a great number of us, when we started to ask each other, all wound up on the DEC program. I've spoken to some, and it's conjecture, but they seem to believe that for us who were then shuffled into the DEC, it was a face-saving measure by VA to say, right, although we don't acknowledge Mefloquine itself as a disabling condition, yet we are going to, and we have taken a lot of those that were complaining about it and offered or funneled them into DEC.
Yep.
So we're giving them 100% disability. That is a face-saving measure. It's a bit of an exit ramp.
That's what I'm on as well.
For
DEC.
VA. You are, yeah. And so again, did you apply?
I might have with my case manager in Newfoundland at the time.
Might have does not sound convincing. So you don't even know. So,
or it might have been suggested by them, I think, for the DEC to apply for it before.
I never applied for it
because there was supposed to be there was supposed to be a deadline later, right? And then they said we should put you in for DEC before you can't get it.
So wouldn't you be able to get it?
Because I was told there was a deadline. It was gonna, after a certain point, it wasn't gonna be available. But that's
poppycock.
Well, I mean,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But I mean, that could be my memory, but it can be VAC.
There's no time limitations to apply for a claim to VA for something. There's no windows of opportunity there.
Yeah.
It's either you are awarded claims based off your eligibility. Your eligibility does not have a time limit. Okay. So again, I'm not a VA guy, and I'm no expert in how VA runs, and half the time they don't make sense anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I think you were fed a load of bunk.
Yeah.
Well, that's how they operate, right?
Yeah.
They're not on the up and up. They never have been. They're an insurance company. Let's remember, VA is nothing more than an insurance company.
Yeah.
Yes, they're one of the very few ministries, federal ministries, that actually provide services like Indigenous Affairs.
They'll hire us a lawyer.
But,
right.
Thank you. They are still an insurance industry, a company concerned with payout ratio, the amount of claims awarded yearly. And they want to keep that as low as possible in order to collect their bonuses. I mean, you know how it works in insurance companies, right? It's all the same. And so is VA. Although they try to perfume or put lipstick on that pig, they're not fooling anyone.
Yeah.
VA is a cantankerous old sow.
Yeah. Now, question for you, because you've researched tons, right? I at the very beginning with Dr. Nevin, I was on your email chain,
Yes.
and that's where I talked to Rui, and I said, "Man, I can't I can't handle this. It's too much." And then he said, "Just let it go."
Yeah, let it go.
So then I left at the start with you with Dr. Nevin,
Yeah.
and then found my way back.
Here's
Right.
why I approached you, Darren Little, Matt Watson, Obi,
Yeah.
Matt. Is it Matt Obi?
Matt
Okay.
Watson, Rob Obi.
Rob,
Yeah.
sorry, Rob, sorry. Got Rob's name wrong. Don't want to get your name wrong, Rob. I'm sure Rob. Maybe I'm wrong on Rob, but quite a few of these guys that I knew
Yeah.
were influential in the airborne, meaning people trusted you. The
Yeah.
reason why I tried to activate you, Darren, Matt, and those other guys, because those were the guys that got along so well with others in the airborne. And if they didn't want to listen to me, maybe they would listen to them.
Yeah.
Those guys that were in tight with the airborne, that, went to the reunions. Because when I stepped out of the military in 2000, I never stepped back into it again. And I did not live anywhere near veterans groups or anything. I was transitioned back into civilian world. I'd lived in Asia for a few years. I had worked again. I was nowhere near veterans communities, which is another reason why I hadn't been tracking Mefloquine.
Yeah.
But I knew the only way I'm going to fight through the cognitive bias about believing that Matchy could have been experiencing the florid psychosis
Yep.
and that Mefloquine is extremely problematic to our health even today.
Yep.
I needed those guys that would be listened to.
Yeah.
And that's why I approached you guys at first.
Yep.
I wanted the guys that other guys liked. Me in the airborne wasn't well liked because I was such a noob. I was a new guy the whole 3 years I was there. When I left the airborne after my 3-year tour there and went back to my battalion, I still didn't even have my first hook.
Yeah.
But had a full tour with the airborne already. How does
Yeah.
that happen?
Yeah.
Right? That's why when I got back, the battalion said, "What the hell? You don't even have a hook on you?" I'm like, "No." They said, "You're going on your 6A.
Yeah.
You're going on your 6A. You understand that?" And I went on my 6A right away. I wound up on the same course
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
But because they're like, they didn't even promote you in the airborne.
Yeah.
They didn't even give you the hook that you deserve. I'm like, well, they were busy. We went to Somalia. They're like, nah, you were just a
Or
fucking noob the whole
blacklisted.
3 years.
Or
They didn't give a fuck
blacklisted
about you.
for a part, right?
Sorry about swearing.
Possibly. Oh no, that's fine.
But that's what it was. But I understood it, and I'm not angry about it because I was still the young guy.
Yeah.
Those guys had been around there forever, quite a few of them, and they were all well established in their social cliques.
Yeah.
So that's why I tried to get you. Now, when you backed out initially, I totally understood it.
Yeah.
But I was super stoked later on when you said, "You know what, John, I'm ready. I want to do this."
Yeah.
And I said, "Damn it. Thank God. Because Mike, you're a cool shit. People will respond to you. People will listen to you. You have much more gravitas in the airborne community."
Yeah.
So when you did come on board, I was like, yeah, yes.
Yeah. And so to say, you did activate me. You hit the switch and I went.
Yes.
Right. It's not, I didn't weigh my options. I didn't do it. It was like you flicked the switch and I went and continued to do everything. Right.
And I think what gave you the confidence in the end was knowing that we now had lawyers.
Yeah, but I mean, even say when I started driving in 2019 and I put the blue chart on the back of my truck, 3 months after I left Newfoundland or
Yeah,
whatever.
the blue chart, the system matrix, which lists all the symptoms.
Yeah, all the symptoms and lists them whether it's PTSD or TBI.
Yes.
Or under the Mefloquine column. I thought I had 4 symptoms. The only thing I had insomnia. I had there wasn't a lot of things that I attributed because I'm like, I never had nightmares or whatever.
Yeah.
But then I tell you, driving and then get out, sit there and look at the back of my tailgate and go, oh, what? That's one of them?
Yeah.
And then I'm like,
realization hits.
and then you're thinking because, you're diagnosed as PTSD. So all these symptoms that you're experiencing, you think all belong to PTSD, right?
Mhm.
And then you're like, well, the just light sensitivity, right? Or sensitivity to light.
Photosensitivity, yeah.
No, that's a PTSD one. That should be under PTSD. And then you realize, no, it's because everything's under Mefloquine and all your symptoms are under Mefloquine. And you're looking under the wrong chart saying, no, those symptoms should, oh, wait, then this is what I have, right? And then
Yeah.
it became, the more you looked at the
The
chart
more dots you
and the
connected.
more you started to connect all the dots, then it's like, no, man, I attribute, really, I would, it's not 100%, but it's probably 95% of my problems are all from Mefloquine poisoning,
Right.
right?
You understand, you're commingled. You're
Yeah,
co-entwined.
yeah,
The question is, what's the ratio? Is it 90-10 quinism PTSD? Is it 60-40, 60% PTSD, 40% quinism? What is it? And only will that be determined through being enrolled in the screening program
yeah,
to give you um, the workups, the health workups and checks to further checkup on you,
yeah,
examinations, to try to tease out what that ratio is, because that ratio will determine your treatment plan. Now, we set up I say we, I mean Dr. Remington Nevin. I
yeah,
never want to take any credit where it's not mine. He was able to set up an arrangement with Lifemark Health Canada.
yeah,
He worked with Dr. Sheila Woodhouse,
yeah,
who she was the head of the vestibular neurological component of Lifemark Health. She adopted what I mentioned earlier, Dr. Nevin's assessment
yeah.
questionnaire. Remember that
Okay.
two-part
Yeah, yeah.
questionnaire?
Yep.
To adopt that, to then have veterans come to Lifemark Health, ask those couple of questions, and breathe in further neurologically and psychiatrically to determine if they were affected by quinism.
Yeah.
Now, so they agree to do this. There's 300 locations of Lifemark Health across Canada. Okay.
Yep.
They've adopted the screening instrument. Here's what happens. Galen Weston Loblaws buys Lifemark Health, a private company. Okay.
Yep.
Lifemark Health got the contract to provide services for veterans. Now, here's where it gets questionable. If Lifemark Health Group has the expertise to be able to screen veterans for the effects of quinism, and they have the contract from Veterans Affairs to provide services to veterans, why has Veterans Affairs not enrolled any of their veterans clients to go to Lifemark Health to be screened for quinism?
Mm.
Not one.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Because they
Where's
don't
the
want to admit
disconnect?
anything, right? They don't want to admit.
Where's the disconnect?
They don't even. They don't even want to say quinism is a thing.
No,
right?
they
But
have
yet,
not
but
acknowledged
yet
this
we
threat.
know that in the United States, at different VAs across the states, people are getting 100% disability claim for
Already.
quinism
And happened since
through
2015.
through Dr. Nevin,
Yeah.
right? He would post like weekly saying how he's added
Yes.
another person for this,
And
another
that
person
he's
for that.
also studied Canadian Afghanistan veterans and knows by
Mm.
looking at their health that several of them are on PTSD claims when nothing more than methadone may be at play.
Yeah. And when I say that I'm not 100% for Mefloquine, and the only reason I say that is because I had a flashback, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, going through Cape Breton, riding my motorcycle, seen like a carpet rolled up on the side of the road, and then went, oh, a dead body.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, and then it was from Somalia, bodies rolled up in a carpet or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And so that's the only thing that I can attribute as a flashback, because we know flashbacks are only found with PTSD, but I
Yeah, it's
mean,
not a
you
feature
know,
of quintism.
but you know, definitely the quinism
Is in there.
right. The rage is kind of ask Spark.
Yeah.
She listens to me
Rage out
quite,
sometimes.
driving in the truck, losing my shit.
Yeah.
Um, and then, turn back to her and say, sorry, right?
Yeah.
Sorry for that, Spark,
Yeah.
right? But and it affects a lot of people, right?
Damn straight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can see as we're talking how you're emotional because you know that you put Spark through something in your rage, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Now
yeah,
imagine that emotion that you have right now. You're doing the same thing to your family
yeah,
as well.
yeah, yeah,
Those outbursts. Your family now are walking around you on eggshells.
yeah,
They don't know what's going on. They're now becoming traumatized.
yeah,
And then this leads to your children. Now this is generational because now
yeah,
your kids who are seeing these outbursts and stuff,
yeah,
right? Uh, for no proper reasoning, out
yeah.
of
Because they
character
don't
and out of
understand the whole
situation,
process. Yeah,
right? Now they have to get counseling for it as they become adults because it was traumatizing for them to witness you, like it was traumatizing a little bit for
yeah,
Spark witnessing your rages. So
yeah,
amplify your emotion you just felt or
yeah,
feeling
yeah,
bad for Spark going through it
yeah.
to
For
those
your
people
family.
that were continually doing it to their family for years with no answers as to why.
Yep. And how many people left their
Even if they were in
families, say,
counseling,
because they didn't want to do that anymore,
left
right?
their families for it,
Even
completed
to say
suicide.
some of the nightmares that happened, right?
Right.
People,
So
the
as we
nightmares
go,
included their family members, right?
you
So that's
can't
why
you can't overemphasize enough the magnitudes of harms caused by
yeah,
the impacts of using this drug for so long in such a nonchalant and dismissive way. And then, and then the injury later to those service members who see their government look the other way and not want to help them.
yeah, yeah.
Think about the betrayal,
And when you're
disillusionment.
going there and the betrayal on that, and the concept of sanctuary trauma,
That
right?
too.
Which, if you want to allude on that,
Yeah. So sanctuary trauma is where someone goes to someone that's providing a duty of care to them, expecting acknowledgement and support and help, but instead experiencing rejection and no validation for it,
yeah,
being dismissed.
yeah,
So you now say to yourself, this sanctuary, supposed sanctuary, your workplace, whatever, what have you, the people that work there, the hierarchy, your bosses, whom you expected to understand what you were going through and commiserate and try to support and help you,
yeah,
instead, either flat out call you a liar or say that you're mentally unbalanced or something else and send you on your little way.
yeah,
That's the sanctuary trauma. That's very real because what it does then is prevent the veteran client from improving their physical and psychological health. They
yeah,
can't move forward because they haven't been acknowledged. They're in like a racetrack, you know
yeah,
how an
yeah,
aircraft
yeah,
will racetrack at times due to inclement weather for the landing. They got a
yeah, yeah,
racetrack. We are, those veterans clients are in this continuous racetrack of confusion, despair, and sanctuary trauma because the Canadian government still has yet to acknowledge what they've done.
yeah,
So people can't move forward in their lives, let alone try to get better with what ails them.
yeah,
It's horrible no matter how you look at it. And again, this is why the first cases, like yours,
yeah,
are at such a high amount in compensation.
yeah,
To get the government to wake the hell up and say, hey, these are just the first few. We've got a couple of thousand behind it.
yeah,
It's time you get on board, but we just got to get to court first.
yeah, yeah,
So keep the faith
yeah, yeah,
because
for
this
sure.
we're almost there.
Just to go back even on women taking mefloquine, I had only recently learned that it affects their menstrual cycle.
Mhm.
So some women had told me they they didn't want to take mefloquine because it
For that.
affected it, right?
Right.
Affected their menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
And then I brought that up with Dr. Nevin, and he mentioned that yes, that is the case.
Yep.
And the other thing that I find kind of unbelievable, say, is that they gave us Mefloquine when doxycycline was available at the time.
Safer alternatives were available.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
didn't have to do that.
Right. Instead, they put us through the ringer.
Yep.
Right. Yep.
So again, once we get to court, they'll
Yep.
pay.
Yep.
They will pay. But why did we ever have to get here? Because it's the government's not paying. We do. We're the taxpayers.
Yeah.
It's the taxpayers are the ones that are going to be left with this costly litigation that never had to occur. It was needless all along.
Yeah.
And so I feel for Canadians who are now going to foot the bill over these multi-million-dollar lawsuits. This is going to be extremely costly.
And, you could probably look at it and say, had they limited it just to Somalia and had done the paperwork and the 28 significant incidents and the, right, because I've talked to so many people, and it seems like so many people were experiencing prodromal symptoms while they were on Mefloquine in Somalia.
Yes.
Right. So
had it been conducted properly, so many lives.
and of the 3,500 litigants that are on the lawsuit right now, possibly that it might only been 500.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
they could have
and
contained us.
think of the then the monetary how much it's going to be on the public.
Yeah, I mean, as Dr. Nevin has stated, this is a problem largely created by themselves. They
Yeah.
created this.
Yeah.
The Canadian government.
Yeah.
They created this problem.
Yeah.
We didn't.
Yeah.
And so they're probably best off to just come to the table,
Yeah.
establish a dialogue, come up with a compensation scheme, work it out, and direct Veterans Affairs to begin to screen people and provide them the treatment pathways they deserve and give them the compensation and claims for which they pay premiums.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're paying for this.
Yeah.
And they can't even get the claims and compensation. It comes out of their paychecks. People forget that you're paying for these entitlements.
Yep.
Through your premiums.
Yep.
So everywhere you look at this, there's negligence and just it's bad. But we don't want to go on forever about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to go to a positive note,
Yes.
then, what are you most proud about? Whether both militarily or
I'm most proud about getting the information out about this. That's what I'm most proud about. That and the fact that other advocates took it upon themselves to find meaning and purpose in their lives, to advocate for what we need to advocate for, and again, spread the word and get this resolved. So thing I'm happiest about in life, in my life of advocacy, is the spreading the awareness and getting other advocates on board.
Yep.
The Mefloquine. Personally, what I'm most happiest about in life is having 3 beautiful, healthy children.
Yeah.
That's my greatest happiness. As a father, as a person, it is. Mefloquine's number 2.
Yeah. But of a huge importance to so many people, right?
Yeah.
Mefloquine. And
it is today.
It's a lot of knocking doors down and getting through and more people getting involved and more information getting out and more information as it's understood coming out.
Yes.
Right. I mean, like Dr. Nevin, I think he only started with his first deployment with the 82nd Airborne, and that's where he started looking into Mefloquine.
Yeah, I watched the podcast. It was an excellent podcast you did with Dr. Nevin a little while ago, and he was explaining how this all fell in his lap. And it's just interesting that was the last guy that you wanted to screw around on Mefloquine, because look what resulted. The guy is such a bright man.
Very, very.
Okay?
It's just,
without him,
you talk with him,
we wouldn't be where we are without him.
Yeah.
Like, we have to acknowledge what this man has done.
Yep.
For so many thousands of people and for science itself, and the fight, the bruises that he's had to take on over the years by institutions that didn't want to come to grips with this, like the CDC, trying to calling Dr. Nevin a crusader, and that the veterans that were there with him that were malingering and whatnot, trying to disparage his early work. Even these institutions Dr. Nevin had to fight against.
Yeah.
So he stayed in the fight. It didn't burn him out. He's still here with it. He's winning cases left, right, and center for veterans in the United States, providing the precedents for other VA entities to adopt, to accept. He has never quit. He's stayed the path.
Yeah.
And he has provided so much strength and conviction for other advocates to assist him that at the end of this, when this is all done, the advocates and everybody at the end of the day better hold a goddamn parade for this man.
Yeah.
You know
We'll still have to hold that party, have the party, and we'll have him at the head table and
damn straight
and be doing the whole thank you thing.
Yes. Oh,
Even though he says, "Oh no, somebody else would have done it anyways."
yeah, I
right?
know.
No, right?
He's not the type, to accept praise easily.
Yeah,
right?
but
just some people are that way.
He's definitely, as yourself, right?
Yeah, I'm hard to accept praise too. I don't.
Yeah, but I mean,
want it. I just want to move on, and I want us to
trying to get it
this.
done. But right in the end, if it wasn't, yourself starting things, approaching other people, right, in order for it to grow, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that you're responsible for having in this fight as well. Myself being one.
And I was only able to do it because it was the people before me. As they say, we stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah.
People have been doing this stuff before I arrived. It's just that when I arrived at a nexus point in time where there was movement internationally, but not in Canada. I picked up on it early and then got connected to those that then gave me the baton to move it forward.
Yep.
But nothing I did was, besides co-founding the movement, and that
was a huge point. Big
one. And also as I continue on X, formerly Twitter, as I continue to network with academia, and they spread the word, because that's where you find them. You find them on X, formerly Twitter.
Yeah.
These academics that are continually retweeting and endorsing and supporting us, they're the ones also providing the punch today.
Yeah.
In an open way, a very obvious way, to also educate Canadians.
Yeah.
So again, it's just,
and
it's all good. We're near the end of this.
And even to think at the very beginning, when the Airborne Regiment was given Mefloquine, I think, was it Rob Prowse was like, wait a minute, I did my research. This doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And too bad there wasn't smarter people like him.
Yeah.
At the start to be saying stuff.
That's right.
Where I'm just like, right. You know best.
Soldier on,
but
modify your behaviors.
And they didn't care.
And the drinking.
Yeah. So, thanks a lot for everything, for doing what you've done, for your advocacy, for your continued work, your continued pushing this forward, and
my pleasure,
making things happen.
Thank you for continuing the Rude Awakening tour. A lot of us sometimes worry about you. Kind of like to see you, stay in one spot for a few months and just catch your breath and chill.
Yeah.
We see you back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, but we also understand the meaning and purpose it gives you.
Yeah.
And we know once this is over, you're probably going to get your own cabin and chill for a while.
Yeah.
You'll deserve it.
I don't know, but because I can't settle down. My mind,
the racing of the mind.
My mind's got to stay occupied, right? Or then I just start spinning. I can
spiral. Yeah.
I can start doing it within a day or two of sitting still.
You're oscillating, jumper. You're oscillating.
Yeah.
Yes.
But and I also feel
grab a slip and get out of it.
Yeah. And I also feel there's a timeline for us, for some of us, right? That you start to get worse.
Yeah.
And then so therefore time is running out.
Oh, I see.
Right. And that's where my mind is, right? Is that time is running out for me.
Yeah.
And if I don't hurry up and we don't start making headway and finding things that can help us, that
we're just gonna have more
I could be dead in a year, right? That's how
for you too. Yeah.
That's how I look at it, right?
So that
So-
explains it to me more, because I was kind of wondering,
Yeah.
you know, I mean,
No,
the
it's-
miles
it's
you're putting
not,
on, bro. Jesus.
Yeah, but it's because I don't.
I get it. I get it. We all need
My
to
clock
find,
is running out of
yeah,
time.
and
right.
but you know, I admire it. We
Yeah.
all need to find what works for us,
Yeah.
so that we continue to stay here, because we have
Yeah.
a lot of people that love us,
Yeah.
and we have to remember that.
True.
We can't just pull the plug.
Yeah, I agree.
Thanks, Tom.